don't expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.
Welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm John Dickerson. The Securities and Exchange Commission launched a civil lawsuit aimed at Goldman Sachs last week. President Obama said his administration learned about it on television. Congressman Darrel Issa isn't so sure. The ranking member of the House Oversight Committee joins me now. Welcome, Congressman. What exactly is your claim about this S.E.C. action and the administration?
Well, there are some things we know for sure. One of them is that the New York Times knew before the public knew, which means there was a leak at the S.E.C. that ultimately could have created insider trading or a number of other events. But more importantly, this had political ramifications. It was issued on the eve of trying to move the financial reform bill through the Senate, very much probably by vilifying Goldman Sachs, helps push voters in the Senate that direction. And then beyond that, there are a number of other questions we have. We simply want answers to questions exactly the way the Security Exchange Commission would ask if there were, let's just say, a suspicion of insider trading at some company.
On the question of any trading, so your suggestion, it seems to me then, is somebody would have shorted Goldman Sachs stock in advance of the announcement because the stock went down 13% or so once it was announced. Is that the notion?
Well, that's a good example of something that the Security Exchange Commission itself investigates about companies if there's been an insider leak. Well, certainly there was clearly a leak that had to originate from the Security Exchange Commission at some point that caused the New York Times to know the story before you and I did. That's a good example. We have other questions. Why did they release it during the trading day? That's not their practice, and it's not a good practice to do. Why did they release it just as a scathing 151-page report on their failures was coming out from their own IG? We want answers to these questions. The American people don't trust government. It's my job not to trust government either.
And in this case, you've had the president now say the administration didn't know about it, and also at the S.E.C. they say there was no political influence or activity here. So you don't believe those claims, essentially.
Well, first of all, there are 5 commissioners, and they voted 3-2 about doing this. So there was a political decision. They were all political appointees. So to say that it's not political or potentially political doesn't pass the American people's sniff test. What we want to know is a sequence of events, emails, correspondence. We believe that you could well find political smoking guns, but more importantly, this was a bad practice, a poorly executed lawsuit without even getting into the merits of what seems to be a very questionable lawsuit. The way they did it was clearly wrong and against their normal practices.
So do you think you're going to get anywhere with this? Has there been any response other than these initial denials?
Well, the denials basically said the S.E.C. never does any wrong and it's always professional. We just want answers to our questions, not a statement about how good an organization is. And it's very possible the president and Rahm Emanuel knew nothing about this. We're not claiming that. We're asking questions to find out who knew what when, because somebody knew what they shouldn't have known too soon.
Okay, and you also are looking into another who knew what when, in which the denials from the White House have not been as fast and as sweeping. And that's the question of Congressman S.E.C. and whether the White House offered him a job. What exactly are you looking after in that case?
Well, in this case, we have a Congressman, Joe S.E.C., a former 3-star admiral, who said unequivocally he was offered a high appointed job by the administration if he would get out of the race. Now, that's a crime on 2 fronts. One is that whole question of getting out of the race happens to be against the law. But as Arlen Specter, his own Democratic opponent, said, that it's a bribe. It's an offer of a bribe, and that's a felony. And as you know, Arlen's a former U.S. attorney. All we want is an answer of who said what to him, and we want it either from Congressman S.E.C. or from the White House, because it does appear as though something was said. As you know, the spokesperson, Robert Gibbs, said it wasn't problematic. Well, that's not for him to decide. We would like the facts, and we'll make our own decision, as would the public.
And this kind of thing, though, it seems like it's been going on in politics for a long time in both Republican and Democratic administrations. There's always a little effort to clear the field for favored candidates and that kind of thing. So what to the charge that you're essentially criminalizing politics in this case?
Well, first of all, the president or anyone in the White House could have said to Joe S.E.C., we're going to campaign long and hard for Arlen Specter, and it's going to hurt your political future. That would have been hard-nosed politics. It would have been fine. But to offer one of your taxpayer paid-for jobs, essentially give him something he might not otherwise have gotten, in return for getting out of a race is both a bribe and a violation of the law influencing the free elections. And remember, if you lose free elections, Republican or Democratic elections, you very quickly can become like the third world dictatorships where everybody gets their job as the minister of X based on a predetermined plan and not based on the will of the people.
In this case, if the president came out and gave as categorical a denial as he gave yesterday on this question of the S.E.C., would that be enough if it was just a better statement from the White House?
If the president said, I didn't offer, and Rahm said, I didn't offer, and you went through everybody in the White House who didn't offer, then the only question would be, Robert Gibbs, who is it that said they did offer something, but it wasn't problematic? We kind of go down the list to find out who made that offer and why press spokesperson Gibbs doesn't think it's problematic. They're not denying the offer. They're making a judgment call on it. Well, you might remember Richard Nixon said if the president orders it, it's legal. I'm sorry, but that's not an opinion the American people are willing to take without knowing all the facts.
We always get back to Nixon in these conversations. So as a last question, Congressman, where do you think this is going to go on this question of SESTAC?
Well, when we get back to arrogance, we get back to Nixon for a reason. But the fact is that we can't let this lie. This is a felony, an accusation of a felony at least. And so either Joe Sestak is lying, in which case he has dishonored his office, or he's telling the truth, in which case a crime has occurred.
Okay. Congressman Issa, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Now to our weekly feature with CBS national security analyst Juan Zarate. We call it Flashpoints because these are the stories that are either erupting all over the world or just about to. So, Juan, what's on tap for this week?
John, we've always got a lot of things to talk about, but today we've got a few things. First, al-Qaeda in Iraq. A devastating blow to them this past week with the announcement that their two senior-most leaders were killed, led by Iraqi forces, supported by U.S. troops. This is a devastating blow not only to the leadership of al-Qaeda in Iraq, but also to the global movement of al-Qaeda, where al-Qaeda had once declared Iraq the central front in the Third World War. They are, in essence, losing steam, and they've basically lost the battle for Iraq in many ways. And I think this event, and I've been talking to experts in the government, this event could be the backbreaker for that movement in Iraq, which has lost popularity, which has faced opposition from the Sunni Arab tribes. And so this is a really devastating blow, and it comes at a good time for the Iraqi government as it's trying to solidify itself after the election. President Maliki trying to solidify his power. This is great timing for the Iraqi people.
Quickly, does it tell us anything about the capabilities of the Iraqi military that they were in the lead here?
Well, absolutely, and this is good timing for the Obama administration because part of the theory about the pullout of American combat troops is the ability of the Iraqis to continue to fight al-Qaeda and extremist elements who've been trying to foment sectarian fighting still. They've been engaged in assassinations, attacking Shia targets, attacking embassies. And so these people are still out there and trying to foment division, but the Iraqis are taking hold, and it's a good news story.
So the U.S. can leave, but the fight will still go on. What's our second hotspot?
Well, the second hotspot is Afghanistan and the coming battle for Kandahar. And this is a battle that the Taliban is already preparing for. They've engaged in a number of suicide attacks and assassinations. This past week we saw the vice mayor of Kandahar, somebody who was widely respected for being a very good technocrat, who was there for the people, was engaged in some very good projects to try to bring roads and other things to the people of Kandahar, was assassinated. And so the Taliban is trying to prepare the battlefield for when American troops and allied troops come to take over Kandahar and to expel the Taliban.
And what does that mean exactly, prepare the battlefield? I mean, other than just killing people, are they trying to psychologically make a play for the local population? What's their game here?
I think it's twofold. One is removing those credible elements of the existing leadership that are connected to Kabul and to the Karzai regime. And so that's why you see the assassination this past week. Secondly, I think they're trying to intimidate people because they know what the strategy is from the American side, which is to not only displace the Taliban, but to co-opt and protect the civilian population and get them on board, to win the hearts and minds. And so the Taliban's trying to affect that before the battle actually takes place.
Last quick question. Do you think there's any chance that what happens here is like what happened in Al-Anbar, which is that the Taliban oversteps and the local population actually gets furious at these kinds of things and is driven into the arms of the American forces?
Potentially, but Kandahar is very different from Anbar, where in Anbar these guys were viewed as foreigners and in some ways intruders into the tribal space. Kandahar is the spiritual home of the Taliban, and there is support for the Taliban in many ways. So it's a different battle. This is also, John, where you see the U.S. needing President Karzai and his brother, both of whom have come under great deal of criticism. And so that's why you've seen the administration backing away from some of its criticism.
Right, talking about him as a partner now. Okay, that's great. Now our third topic.
Further tension in the Middle East, but this time coming from Syria. You have allegations of the Syrians providing Scud missiles to Hezbollah. With these allegations not only from the Israeli government but from the U.S. government, with the U.S. protesting and demanding more information of the Syrians. This adds to the alarm bells that the Israelis have been raising for some time, that Hezbollah is rearming, preparing for a potential battle in the future, and that they are continuing to act as a state within the state of Lebanon. Interesting in this, though, John, is that the Prime Minister of Lebanon, an opponent of Hezbollah, politically, Saad Hariri, the son of Rafiq Hariri, who was assassinated, actually came out and defended against these charges and said they weren't true. And so this creates a bit of a political muddle, and I think is a bit problematic. But you do see the Americans taking this very seriously and asking the Syrians some serious questions.
What does the U.S. make of Hariri's move? That would seem to make our situation difficult for us.
Well, Hariri is a deal maker, and he's trying to survive in an environment in which Hezbollah has increased its power and its influence. He's made visits to Syria and in treaties to Hezbollah, and so he's dealing in a political environment where he has to deal with these people, and so I think part of that is political theater. The one thing this demonstrates, though, is a bit of the failure of the attempt to engage with Syria. You see Syria continuing to thumb its nose at U.S. engagement or attempts at that. And I think you're starting to see the U.S. diplomatic corps gear up toward more confrontation with Syria.
All right, now number 4, our final flashpoint.
Well, we like to bring up things that are under the radar screen, interesting or important. This comes from Spain. The super judge, known for his counterterrorism expertise and work, Baltasar Garzón, is now under siege. He's got 2 legal battles on his hands. And this is important because this is one of the most important prosecutorial magistrates in the world. He's gone after bin Laden, Al-Qaeda cells in Spain. He's also gone after Pinochet and the Argentine military dictator. So he's seen as an advocate for human rights internationally. Well, he's facing 2 battles. First, a charge of bribery that he's alleged to have dropped a case because he was being funded while he was at NYU on a sabbatical. So he's addressing those charges. And secondly, and more importantly, charges that he is illegally looking at human rights abuses within Spain during the Franco era. This is the 1930s era, which many people have thought was a closed chapter and thought that the 1977 amnesty law closed the chapter. But he's reopened the debate, and that has put him right in the crosshairs of people from the right, from the Franco era, who do not want to see this scab picked.
So he essentially is being tied down with these 2. And so is his effectiveness on these other fronts, the things for which he's become famous, is his effectiveness neutered? I mean,
I think so. I think what it does, he's occupied with these 2 issues that he now has to defend himself openly and publicly. But it does slow some of his investigations. The good thing is Spain has developed a cadre of very good counterterrorism prosecutors who do some very good work along with French prosecutors and others.
Okay. Juan Zarate, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
And finally today, Ben Franklin got a makeover Tuesday on the $100 bill. He's still there, unsmiling, but his surroundings have changed. As our Fernando Suarez reports, it's not just for aesthetics, but also for security. Take a look.
14 years in the making. It came complete with an online countdown.
It is my pleasure to now show you the new $100 note.
The new $100 bill was designed with the help of the U.S. Secret Service with greater security to thwart counterfeiters.
Counterfeit currency is moved around the world like really almost any other contraband, almost just like drugs. Overseas, the most counterfeit denomination is the $100 note.
In fact, more than 2/3 of all $100 bills, roughly $650 billion worth, are in use outside of U.S. borders.
With the 100 campaign, we need to have a worldwide campaign. It's a much more comprehensive effort.
A worldwide campaign that Bureau of Printing and Engraving Director Larry Felix says makes circulating the new $100 note more complicated than previously redesigned bills.
The 100 is much more difficult. When we did the 5, for example, it took us just a few months from the decision to change the 5 to, and when we put it out in circulation about a year after or so. But this takes a lot longer because it's much more complex and it's much more of a worldwide note.
Circulation is just one of the challenges. The other is compatibility, and that takes time.
The reason why we unveiled it today, but we won't be putting it in circulation until February, is each of these machines have to get stacks of these notes and be able to accept them.
But before the $100 bill could go from here to here, designers had to be sure the bill was well protected.
We asked the Secret Service, what do you see? What types of counterfeiting threats do you see in the marketplace? And then we asked the Federal Reserve, what kinds of counterfeits do you see in the banks and financial institutions? And the group of us sit down together and then put together concepts.
Concepts that eventually turn into this, the department's third ever redesign of the $100 bill, featuring an array of new security measures like three-dimensional ink and color-shifting holograms.
The design can't be stolen or replicated. Financial systems are built on trust and confidence, and a loss of confidence, as we saw in this crisis, can have devastating consequences. But even in the face of all our challenges as a country, in this financial crisis, as in so many, we saw the world turn to the United States of America. They sought the safety and security of the dollar and U.S. Treasury securities.
Nearly $100 million worth of new $100 bills have been printed. Crews are working overtime to produce the new note. In the coming weeks, they expect to have already printed in the billions of dollars. But don't expect to see them in your banks until early next year. John?
Thanks, Fernando. And that does it for Washington Unplugged. Make sure to join us again tomorrow on CBSNews.com, where we'll unveil our new enhanced live player. Join the conversation, answer poll questions, and follow me and our CBS News team on Twitter. I'm John Dickerson. Have a great day.
If we don't expand our imagination,
Justification for being what you are.